The golden couple. The crystal chandeliers of the Blackwood estate caught the late afternoon sun, casting prismatic rainbows across the manicured lawns where 200 of New York's most influential people had gathered. Victoria Sterling Blackwood adjusted her flowing emerald gown, her 7-month pregnancy giving her an ethereal glow that had photographers snapping discreetly from behind topiary hedges. "You look radiant, darling," Marcus whispered in her ear, his arm encircling her waist with practiced ease. At 35, Marcus Blackwood was the golden boy of Manhattan's financial district, heir to a shipping empire worth $3 billion. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his navy suit tailored to perfection, and his smile carried the confidence of a man who had never known failure. Victoria beamed at him, her hand resting protectively over her belly. "I can't believe we're finally going to know if it's a boy or girl. Your mother must be beside herself with excitement." Across the lawn, Elena Blackwood stood like a sentinel in her black Chanel suit, her silver hair pulled back in a severe chignon. At 68, she commanded respect with a single glance, her pale blue eyes scanning the crowd with the precision of a general surveying a battlefield. She had built the Blackwood social empire alongside her late husband, and every detail of today's event bore her meticulous touch. "Mother has very specific ideas about the future," Marcus replied, his voice carrying an odd tension that Victoria couldn't quite place. "She's been planning this grandchild's life since we announced the pregnancy." The guest list read like a who's who of American power. Senators, CEOs, socialites, and celebrities mingled beneath white silk tents adorned with gold and white roses. Victoria's father, James Sterling, a successful but modest real estate developer from Connecticut, looked overwhelmed by the opulence. He stood near the champagne fountain, his wife Margaret beside him, both clearly out of their element among Manhattan's elite. "I still can't believe my little girl married into all this," James had whispered to Victoria earlier, gesturing at the estate with its tennis courts, infinity pool, and helicopter landing pad. The centerpiece of the afternoon was an enormous cannon positioned on a raised platform, surrounded by cameras from 3 different lifestyle magazines. Marcus had insisted on the most elaborate gender reveal possible, claiming it would be a moment worthy of the Blackwood legacy. As 3 o'clock approached, the crowd gathered around the platform. Victoria felt a flutter of nervousness as she climbed the steps, Marcus's hand steady on her back. The cannon was decorated with white ribbons and contained either pink or blue powder, depending on what their doctor had sealed in the envelope weeks ago. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus's voice boomed across the lawn as he took the microphone. "Thank you for joining Victoria and me on this momentous day. The Blackwood family is about to welcome its newest member, and we couldn't be happier to share this moment with all of you." Victoria smiled at the crowd, recognizing faces from charity galas, business dinners, and society pages. These were Marcus's people, his world, and she had worked hard to fit in. Her own background in journalism seemed quaint compared to the inherited wealth and generational power surrounding her. "On the count of 3, Marcus continued, "we'll discover whether we're having a little prince or princess." He handed Victoria the cannon's cord, their fingers intertwining. 1, the crowd chanted along, smartphones raised to capture the moment. 2, Victoria's heart raced with anticipation. In seconds, she would know whether she was carrying Marcus's son or daughter. 3, they pulled the cord together, and an explosion of brilliant pink powder erupted into the sky, creating a stunning cloud against the clear blue afternoon. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. "A girl!" Victoria cried, tears streaming down her face as she turned to embrace Marcus. "We're having a daughter." But Marcus wasn't smiling. His face had transformed into something cold and terrible, his jaw set with grim determination. The microphone was still in his hand, and instead of celebrating, he raised it to his lips. Thank you all for witnessing this moment, he said, his voice cutting through the celebration like a blade. The crowd fell silent, sensing something wrong. I want to make something perfectly clear to everyone here, including my wife. Victoria's smile faltered, confusion replacing joy. Marcus, what are you doing? He stepped away from her, his eyes hard as flint. This child may be yours, Victoria, but it certainly isn't mine. The words hit the crowd like a physical blow. 200 people stood frozen, their champagne glasses suspended halfway to their lips, their smiles dying on their faces. Victoria felt the world tilt sideways, the pink powder still drifting around them like toxic snow. Whatever happens next, Marcus continued, his voice carrying across the deadly silent lawn. I want everyone here to witness that I deny any claim to this pregnancy. This child is not a Blackwood. The DNA deception. Victoria's legs gave out as the crowd erupted in horrified whispers. Her father, James Sterling, was the first to move, rushing through the stunned guests to catch his daughter before she collapsed completely. The pink powder settled on her emerald dress like evidence of a crime. Get her inside, Margaret Sterling commanded, her maternal instincts overriding her shock. Together, they helped Victoria through the French doors into the estate's marble foyer, away from the prying eyes and clicking cameras. Dr. Patricia Hayes arrived within the hour, her silver Mercedes cutting through the line of departing guests who fled the scene like survivors of a natural disaster. At 52, Dr. Hayes was Manhattan's most respected geneticist, a woman whose testimony had decided custody battles and inheritance disputes for the city's elite. I came as soon as I heard, Dr. Hayes said, her voice gentle but professional, as she examined Victoria in the master bedroom. Your friend Sophia called me. She's quite concerned. Sophia Chen had been Victoria's anchor throughout the chaos, her loyalty unwavering even as other friends began to distance themselves. As Victoria's former colleague from her journalism days, Sophia understood the power of narrative, and she knew this story didn't make sense. The DNA test results came back yesterday, Victoria whispered, showing Dr. Hayes the report on her laptop. 0% probability. But Patricia, I swear on my life, I've never been with another man. Marcus is the only one. Dr. Hayes studied the report, her brow furrowing as she examined the technical details. This is from Precision Genetics Lab, she noted. They're not one of our usual partners. Who chose this facility? Marcus insisted on them, said they were the most accurate, most discreet. Victoria's voice cracked. He planned this, didn't he? The public humiliation, the timing. He wanted maximum damage. Victoria, I need you to listen to me carefully, Dr. Hayes said, closing the laptop. I've been doing genetic testing for 25 years, and I've seen my share of fraudulent results. This report has several irregularities. Sophia leaned forward from her chair by the window. What kind of irregularities? The sample identification codes don't follow standard protocols. The statistical analysis is oversimplified. And most importantly, there's no chain of custody documentation. Dr. Hayes pulled out her phone. I'm calling Detective Ray Morrison. If someone manipulated these results, it's criminal fraud. Detective Morrison arrived that evening, his weathered face grim as he reviewed the evidence. At 48, he had built his reputation investigating corporate fraud and family conspiracies among New York's wealthy elite. The Blackwood name was familiar to him. Old money with old secrets. Mrs. Blackwood, Morrison said, settling into the leather chair across from Victoria. I need to ask some difficult questions. Can you think of anyone who would benefit from destroying your marriage? Victoria shook her head, exhaustion weighing on her like a physical force. Marcus's mother never fully approved of me, but this seems extreme even for Eleanor. What about business rivals? Anyone who might want to damage your husband's reputation or position? Marcus just inherited controlling interest in Blackwood Industries last month when his grandfather's will was executed, Sophia interjected. Maybe someone's trying to destabilize him. Morrison made notes in his worn leather notebook. I'll need to investigate this testing facility. In the meantime, I want you to get an independent DNA test done through Dr. Hayes. We need clean results from a reputable lab. As Morrison gathered his things to leave, his phone buzzed with a text. His expression darkened as he read it. What is it? Victoria asked. Someone's been asking questions about you, Mrs. Blackwood. My contacts at the tabloids say there's a bidding war for exclusive photos and interviews about today's incident. He paused at the door. I'd stay away from windows and consider hiring security. This story is about to get much bigger. That night, as Victoria lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Sophia sat vigil in the chair beside her. The house felt different. Now too big, too quiet, filled with shadows and secrets she was only beginning to understand. Patricia thinks the samples were switched, Victoria whispered into the darkness, but that means someone had access to both Marcus's DNA and mine, someone close enough to orchestrate this entire deception. Who has that kind of access? Sophia asked. Victoria's hand moved to her belly, feeling the baby's gentle movements, a reminder that despite everything, life continued growing inside her. Someone in the family, someone who wanted to destroy me badly enough to destroy Marcus too. Through the window, she could see the estate's security lights casting long shadows across the lawn where, just hours ago, her world had exploded in a cloud of pink powder. The truth was out there somewhere, buried beneath layers of deception and betrayal, but as Dr. Hayes had promised, the real DNA results would come soon, and when they did, Victoria would learn just how deep the conspiracy against her truly ran. Mille Part 3. The Family Conspiracy. The law offices of Cross & Associates occupied 3 floors of a glass tower overlooking Central Park, its marble lobby a testament to the power wielded within its walls. Amanda Cross sat behind her mahogany desk like a queen on her throne, her red hair perfectly coiffed, her sharp green eyes missing nothing as Detective Morrison and Dr. Hayes presented their evidence. "Gentlemen," Amanda said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had negotiated billion-dollar deals. "What you're suggesting is that my client's family orchestrated an elaborate conspiracy to frame his pregnant wife. That's quite an accusation." Morrison leaned forward, his folder thick with documentation. "Mrs. Cross, we've traced the ownership of Precision Genetics Lab. It's a subsidiary of Meridian Holdings, which is controlled by a trust registered to Theodore Blackwood." Amanda's composure cracked for just a moment, a flicker of surprise that Dr. Hayes caught immediately. Theodore Blackwood had been Marcus's grandfather, the patriarch who had built the shipping empire from nothing. He had died 6 months ago at the age of 91, leaving behind a will so complex it required teams of lawyers to interpret. "Theodore's been dead for 6 months, Amanda said carefully. "But his influence isn't," Morrison replied. "We've also discovered that someone has been making regular payments to Rebecca Walsh, a senior nurse at Manhattan Presbyterian Hospital, where Mrs. Blackwood received her prenatal care." At that moment, Rebecca Walsh was sitting in an interrogation room 3 blocks away, her hands shaking as she faced the reality of her situation. At 34, she had worked at Manhattan Presbyterian for 8 years, building a reputation as a dedicated professional. Her financial troubles had started when her daughter needed experimental cancer treatment not covered by insurance. "I never meant for it to go this far," Rebecca whispered to the police officer across from her. "They said it was just a simple switch. Replace one sample with another. They said no one would get hurt." "Who approached you, Rebecca?" the officer asked gently. "A man named Richard Blackwood. He said he was Marcus's brother, that he was trying to protect the family from a gold digger. Tears streamed down her face. He paid for my daughter's treatment. $50,000, just like that. I thought I was saving my child's life. Back at the law office, Amanda Cross was placing urgent phone calls. Richard Blackwood had been the black sheep of the family for 20 years, cut off from the inheritance after a series of scandals involving gambling and failed business ventures. But Theodore's will had included a provision that few knew about. If Marcus died or was deemed unfit to inherit, Richard would become the primary beneficiary. Richard's been living in Europe for the past 5 years, Amanda explained to Morrison. Officially, he's been working in real estate development. Unofficially, he's been building connections with some very dangerous people. Dr. Hayes studied the family tree Amanda had sketched on her notepad. What exactly did Theodore's will stipulate about Marcus's inheritance? Amanda hesitated, bound by attorney-client privilege, but recognizing the gravity of the situation. Theodore was old-fashioned. He believed the Blackwood line should continue through legitimate heirs only. If Marcus were to divorce under circumstances involving moral turpitude, the inheritance would pass to the next eligible male heir. Richard, Morrison said grimly. There's more, Amanda continued. Theodore's will also includes a clause about business partnerships. If Marcus's reputation were severely damaged, say by a public scandal involving infidelity, the board of directors could vote to remove him as CEO. Richard has been quietly acquiring proxy votes from minority shareholders for months. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Richard hadn't just wanted to destroy Marcus's marriage. He had orchestrated a complete takeover of the Blackwood empire. Meanwhile, at a private clinic in the Upper East Side, Victoria was undergoing her second DNA test under Dr. Hayes's supervision. The procedure was identical to the first, but this time every step was documented, every sample labeled and witnessed. The results will be ready in 72 hours, Dr. Hayes assured her as they left the clinic. But Victoria, I need you to prepare yourself. If Richard has gone to these lengths to frame you, he won't stop here. This is about $500 million and control of a business empire. The corporate takeover. The Manhattan courthouse buzzed with activity as reporters clustered around the entrance like vultures sensing carrion. Inside courtroom 402, Judge Harold Preston, a stern man in his 70s with silver hair and penetrating grey eyes, called the emergency hearing to order. The Blackwood family's dirty laundry was about to be aired in public, and half of New York's elite had gathered to witness the spectacle. Richard Blackwood entered through the back door, flanked by his legal team. At 42, he bore a striking resemblance to Marcus. The same dark hair, the same strong jawline, but where Marcus carried himself with confident elegance, Richard moved with the predatory grace of someone who had spent years plotting his revenge. His expensive suit couldn't quite hide the lean hunger in his eyes, the look of a man who had been denied what he believed was rightfully his. Your Honor, Richard's attorney began, my client is seeking emergency guardianship of Blackwood Industries assets, citing the CEO's recent mental breakdown and erratic behavior. Victoria sat in the front row beside Sophia Chen and her parents, her heart pounding as she watched Marcus enter with his own legal team. He looked haggard, his usual polish replaced by hollow exhaustion. Their eyes met briefly across the courtroom, a moment of connection that spoke of years of shared love now poisoned by doubt and betrayal. Judge Preston reviewed the mountain of paperwork before him. This court is asked to determine whether Marcus Blackwood is fit to continue as CEO of Blackwood Industries, based on allegations of mental instability stemming from his public accusations against his pregnant wife. Catherine Mills sat in the gallery, her presence a reminder of the corporate vultures circling Blackwood Industries. She had spent the past week quietly purchasing additional shares through shell companies, positioning herself for whatever chaos would emerge from today's proceedings. "I call Theodore Blackwood to the stand," Richard's attorney announced. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Theodore had been dead for 6 months. "Your Honor, I present a deposition recorded by Theodore Blackwood 3 months before his death, in which he expressed concerns about his grandson's judgment and marriage." The video screen flickered to life, showing Theodore Blackwood in his library, his once commanding presence reduced by illness, but his voice still carrying authority. "If Marcus allows emotion to cloud his business judgment," the recorded Theodore said, "if he makes decisions that compromise the family's reputation or financial stability, then perhaps the inheritance should pass to someone with clearer vision." Victoria felt sick. Even from beyond the grave, Theodore was orchestrating her destruction. Detective Morrison had been working around the clock to unravel the conspiracy. That morning, he had made a breakthrough. Rebecca Walsh, the nurse who had switched the DNA samples, had provided him with bank records showing payments from Richard Blackwood dating back 8 months, long before Victoria's pregnancy was announced. "Your Honor," Morrison said, taking the witness stand, "I have evidence that this entire situation was orchestrated as part of a criminal conspiracy to defraud the Blackwood family of their inheritance." He presented Rebecca's confession, the financial records, and most damning of all, recorded phone conversations between Richard and Catherine Mills, discussing their plans to merge their companies once Richard gained control of Blackwood Industries. The defendant, Richard Blackwood, arranged for fraudulent DNA testing, bribed hospital personnel, and manipulated family relationships to execute a hostile takeover of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, Morrison testified. Richard's attorney objected vehemently, but the evidence was overwhelming. Phone records showed Richard had been in contact with Precision Genetics Lab for months. Financial records revealed payments not just to Rebecca Walsh, but to several other conspirators, including a private investigator who had been stalking Victoria for weeks, documenting her daily routine for reasons that were now becoming clear. Dr. Patricia Hayes took the stand next, presenting the results of Victoria's second DNA test. "Your Honor, the independent testing performed at Columbia Presbyterian shows a 99.97% probability that Marcus Blackwood is the biological father of Mrs. Blackwood's unborn child." The courtroom erupted. Marcus's head snapped up, his eyes finding Victoria's across the room. For the first time in weeks, she saw recognition there, not the cold stranger who had humiliated her at the gender reveal, but the man she had fallen in love with 5 years ago. But Richard wasn't finished. Standing from his seat, he addressed the court directly, his voice carrying the desperate edge of a man whose carefully laid plans were crumbling around him. "Your Honor, my brother has been mentally unstable for months. Even if the child is his public behavior, his paranoid accusations, these are not the actions of a man fit to run a billion-dollar corporation." Catherine Mills rose from her seat in the gallery. "Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that Mr. Richard Blackwood approached Titan Shipping 6 months ago with detailed plans for acquiring Blackwood Industries through manufactured scandal and corporate manipulation." She handed over a folder containing emails, meeting transcripts, and recorded conversations that painted a picture of elaborate corporate espionage. Richard had promised Catherine that once he gained control of Blackwood Industries, he would orchestrate a merger that would eliminate his family's company as competition. "He told me he could deliver the company by Christmas," Catherine testified. "All he needed was to remove Marcus from the equation and ensure that the inheritance passed to him instead." The truth was finally emerging. Richard had spent years planning his revenge, manipulating everyone from hospital nurses to corporate rivals, using his family's tragedy as a weapon in his war for control. Judge Preston called for a recess, but the damage was done. As the courtroom cleared, Victoria found herself face to face with Marcus for the first time since the gender reveal party. They stood in the hallway, surrounded by lawyers and reporters, the weight of betrayal and truth hanging between them like a physical barrier. "Victoria," Marcus said, his voice breaking, "I'm so sorry. I believed the test. I believed my own family. Would never—" "Your brother destroyed our marriage for money," Victoria replied, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "The question now is whether we can rebuild what he tore apart." Through the courthouse windows, they could see Richard being led away in handcuffs, his empire of lies finally collapsing. But the damage to the Blackwood family and to Victoria's trust would take much longer to repair. Part 5. Truth and Redemption. 6 weeks later, Victoria stood at the window of her private room at Mount Sinai Hospital, watching the first snow of winter dust the city below. The contractions had started at dawn, and now, as evening approached, she was about to meet the daughter who had been at the center of so much chaos and pain. Marcus sat beside her bed, his hand gently holding hers, a tentative reconciliation that had begun the day Richard was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering. The judge had been particularly harsh, noting that Richard's crimes had not only stolen money, but had weaponized the sacred bonds of family and marriage. "Are you ready for this?" Marcus asked softly, his thumb tracing circles on the back of Victoria's hand. Victoria looked at him, really looked for the first time in months. The man she had married was still there beneath the guilt and exhaustion, but he was changed. The easy confidence had been replaced by something deeper, more thoughtful. He had spent the weeks since the trial in therapy, trying to understand how his family's dysfunction had nearly destroyed the woman he loved. "I've been ready for 9 months," Victoria replied, squeezing his hand as another contraction peaked. "But Marcus, when she's born, everything changes. No more secrets. No more letting your family's expectations come before our marriage." Dr. Sarah Martinez, Victoria's obstetrician, entered with her usual calm efficiency. "It's time," she announced, checking the monitors. "Your daughter is ready to make her entrance." What followed was a blur of controlled chaos. Medical professionals, moving with practiced precision, while Victoria focused on the monumental task of bringing life into the world. Marcus never left her side, whispering encouragement and promises into her ear. "I can see her head," Dr. Martinez announced. "One more push, Victoria." At 8:47 p.m. on December 15th, Grace Elizabeth Blackwood entered the world with a strong cry that echoed through the delivery room. She was perfect, 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a shock of dark hair that marked her unmistakably as Marcus's daughter. "She looks just like you," Victoria whispered to Marcus as Dr. Martinez placed Grace in her arms. The baby's eyes opened, revealing the same deep blue that had made Victoria fall in love with her father years ago. Marcus touched his daughter's tiny hand, tears streaming down his face. "She's beautiful. She's absolutely perfect." In the hallway outside, the extended family had gathered. James and Margaret Sterling sat beside Elena Blackwood in an uncomfortable truce. The past months had humbled Elena, forcing her to confront the toxic legacy her family had created. Her son Richard's crimes had made headlines around the world, and the Blackwood name would take years to recover from the scandal.